Hello, I'm Raymond, and welcome to another Project Feline devlog. Over the past month, I've been working on the meshing pass for the game's demo level, creating my own custom 3D assets to bring the world of Project Feline to life. In this episode, we'll be exploring my 3D creation pipeline, and how I went about building the various props and components needed for the game's environment. So, without further ado, let's get into it. My current goal for Project Feline is to take it from a prototype to a comprehensive vertical slice to give players a clear idea on what the game's vision is, both in terms of gameplay and style. Now, this is the first V-Slice I have done for this project, and I think it's unlikely to expect everything to look final and polished straight away. The main goal is just to have a draft of every aspect so I get an idea of what it could all look like in the big picture. So creating draft models, draft soundtrack, draft effects, just so that I have an idea of what all of these look like when combined together. And it's my hope that after establishing those, I can then go back and iterate on each of those aspects incrementally throughout development. To fulfill this goal, I'm currently taking one of my existing level blockouts and turning it into a polished demo map, decorating it with models, lighting, textures, and effects. I will be making future devlogs to cover all of these stages, but this episode will be focusing primarily on the creation of 3D models and textures, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the future videos. Before starting my development for this month, I had two prototype maps to choose from. The Skyport, a level where players must reach the goal as fast as possible, or the Interchange, a semi-open world map where the player must attain collectibles to proceed. Ultimately, I ended up choosing the Skyport, as it would be easier for me to polish this level with models and effects. In the level design pipeline, there are four major phases: the blockout pass, the meshing pass, the lighting pass, and the polish pass. Now, seeing as I already had a blockout made for this level, it was time for me to focus on the meshing pass, creating 3D models to populate the environment. Being a solo developer, my goal with this level was to create as much content from as few assets as possible, to try and make all of my assets modular. When starting my development sprint, I looked to my previous concept sketches and made an asset list for every type of model I would need to make. A basic plywood plank for platforming, a roadblock to use as a barrier, scaffolding platforms and stairs, a small simple crate model that could be stacked and placed around the level to allow for platforming, various sizes of shipping crates which make up the majority of the scene's structure, and a crane tower model, used mainly for scenery but also able to be used for platforming. Also needed for these assets was a coherent color palette, and to make this I decided to drive out to a real shipping port for photo reference. I managed to extract 4 major palettes from those photos, and then I took them into Photoshop and did some sketches to play around with the different color combinations. After all that, it was now time to enter the modeling phase. Most of these models were quite simple to create, using simple box modeling techniques, and because a lot of these models are symmetrical, I would only need to model half, sometimes even just a quarter of a model, and use the mirror modifier to fill in the rest. For the scaffolding models, I wanted to create a set of modular pieces that I could piece together in Unreal to create level geometry, kind of like a Lego set. To do this, I broke the scaffolding pieces down into different segments: a standard platform railing for the left and right sides. I had a staircase bit as well, and even that I managed to break down into a few different sections. I had the left and right ends of the staircase, as well as a middle piece. And I did this so that I could make the staircases as wide or as thin as they needed to be. To do this, I would place the left side of the staircase. I would then copy the middle piece in as many times as needed to meet the required width, and then I would cap it off with the right piece at the end. I thought it better to tile the middle piece as opposed to stretching it, which would also stretch the texture. When I was visiting the shipyard, I noticed that they had 3 different sizes of shipping crates: the 3-meter crate, the 6-meter crate, and the 12-meter crate. And I wanted to have these 3 sizes present in my own assets for the game. When looking at the sketch of my shipping crate, I noticed that I could break it down into smaller components that could be rearranged to create the different sizes. I noticed the large majority of the crate was made out of the same piece, just duplicated over and over. So this area with the indented pattern going across the sides and top, I called the body piece. I then made an end piece to place at the end of the crate, and I also made 2 doors to go on either side of the other end of the crate, and a frame for which those doors would be held in place. To get that extra detail without sacrificing game performance, I made 2 versions of each piece, a high poly version and a low poly version. And by using a process called baking, I managed to generate a normal map. Normal maps are often used to make flat surfaces appear bumpy, granting the illusion of detail. And with this technique, I baked out a normal map of the high poly mesh and applied it to the lower poly version of each of those components. The high poly shipping crate was constructed from 1,182 polygons. By using normal maps, I managed to get that down to just 78 polygons, making for a much more optimized game experience. This low poly version not only included the exterior of the crate, but an interior as well. And because the doors are separate models, I was able to have crates with open doors leading into fully fledged interiors, allowing me to put cozy little areas in the level such as this one. As for the crane model, I also broke that down into its different modular pieces. Mainly the body, and then as for the head, I broke that down into the base of the head, the top, the back, and the front. And a lot of these pieces just use the same bit of scaffolding repeated over and over. After creating all of these models, it was then time to give them some life with textures. And before texturing can commence, of course, we have to UV map each model to project flatly on a surface. And then once that projection is done, we can then take it into Photoshop and give it some detail. Most of these models had duplicated surfaces, and by overlapping the UV islands, I managed to texture more of the model using a smaller area of the texture, allowing me to maximize the texel density. But Ray, you might ask, doesn't having overlapping UVs mean that you'll have problems with baked lighting? And yes, but actually no. When you import a model into Unreal Engine, it generates a second UV channel, which is used exclusively for light mapping. In this UV channel, light maps can be arranged in a different way, and those overlapped faces can be solved, but still allowing you to use that original UV channel for the textures. Luckily, Unreal will generate this second channel automatically, but I believe you can modify it by hand if necessary. So for my current textures, I used very simple flat colors from my color palette. I didn't put that much time into creating detail just yet. I would love to return to these textures later in development and experiment with different types of detail and styles, but for now, this will suffice. For assets such as the shipping crate, the scaffolding, and the plywood platform, I used white as the primary texture color, so that I could hue shift the material in an engine to create different color variants. After finishing off those textures, I then imported the models from Blender to Unreal, set up the materials, and began reconstructing the skyport blockout using these new assets. Because the initial concept for the skyport was primarily shipping crates, I made heavy use of this asset throughout the entire scene. It took me several days to completely reconstruct the map, but I eventually got it done. And that about covers the meshing pass for the demo level in Project Feline. Now, this did take a bit longer than expected because I had initially planned to use an asset store bought pack to construct this map, but I did run into some complications, and in the time it was going to take me to solve them, I thought, well, I might as well just create my own set of assets that meet my project specifications. Now, there is a bit of contention online between store-bought assets and custom assets. I personally believe that store-bought assets are an excellent resource, especially if you're an independent developer. It could save you a lot of time and money. It's just in my specific case for these models, I couldn't quite find what I was looking for, and it was cheaper for me to just make my own. But if you're an indie developer watching and you need some assets made, I would definitely recommend checking the asset store and see if it's already been made. I don't think you should feel stigmatized by using licensed assets, but I would say as a word of caution, when you're looking through the asset store, make sure the asset pack you're buying hasn't already been pirated from somewhere else. Sadly, those do exist. But apart from those outliers, I think it's a great resource. So, thank you for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe, and enable notifications so you don't miss the next episode, where I will be focusing on the lighting pass for this level. I'm also super excited to announce that I have new Project Feline merch available linked in the description. I've brought back the Gabby design, now on a hoodie, and I've dropped a new wordmark design, available in t-shirt and hoodie form. These are only available for a limited time, so act quick before they're gone. Links are in the video description. Follow me on Twitch to watch live development streams of Project Feline, and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more frequent updates on the game in between devlogs. These devlogs are funded by all of my wonderful supporters on Patreon, and I'd like to give a special thank you to my top tier supporters. If you'd like to support the production of these videos, you can make your pledge via my Patreon, linked in the description, and get exclusive access to behind the scenes posts and exclusive chats on my Discord server. Thank you so much for following my development journey, and I'll see you in the next one.